Hello guys, today I'm showing off the newest build in my ongoing megacity project, and today it is the Notre-Dame de Paris Cathedral from Paris, France. This is the first time I've ever tried to replicate a building almost one for one in Minecraft, and I'm super happy with how it turned out. So technically this building is at about 1.5 to 1 scale. The real Notre Dame is about 20 extra blocks that way, and about 40 extra blocks that way, I think. But I feel like I got the scale really right for this city, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. So I built a cemetery out back, I built the interior, and in today's video, I'm going to show you around and talk about some of the tips and tricks that I kind of picked up while trying to make this. The best trick I have is to use tons of references, and I used a ton of references when I was making this build. I used about 4 types of references by my account. So the first one were historical depictions of the cathedral. And I used this mainly for the front facade so that I could see what it kind of looked like at the time. The second one is modern day photos. So for details like these little roof statues up here, or even these little tiny roof windows, I couldn't really tell where they were supposed to be on the building just from old-timey photos. So I used some of the more modern pictures of the cathedral. The third one is 3D models. Now, this was really important when I was trying to get these buttresses right. There are a lot of little finicky shapes, and even though a 3D model will never be 100% accurate to the building, it'll tell you a lot about what kind of shapes you should be trying to include. And for a really famous building like this, it was pretty easy to find a bunch of different 3D models, mostly for the exterior. This leads me to the fourth type, which is 360 photos. So if there's a building that you're trying to replicate in Minecraft, try looking up to see if there is a virtual tour available online. A virtual tour means somebody went in and took a bunch of photos that you can spin around and see what the whole room looks like from one position. And this was really useful for trying to do the interiors, although my big caveat with this is that I now built a cathedral that looks like the modern day Notre-Dame Cathedral, not necessarily what it would have looked like 800 years ago. That being said, why don't we go down and we'll get right into the interior. Alright, so we are here at the building's facade. I tried to include a lot of these white statues everywhere, although in the real cathedral there are a ton more. For instance, this entire archway is white statues, which I tried to kind of hint at with these little hidden bits of diorite back there. We enter through this big double copper door, and as we come inside, we get into the cathedral proper. So the cathedral is split up into 5 aisles, basically. We have this big central part, we have this aisle, and there's kind of supposed to be another one here, but because of some scale issues, this is only about 1 block deep in the end. Basically, in the real cathedral, these little bits by the windows are all filled with little kind of chapels. So what I did here is I tried to fill them with similar kind of things. So this one has a statue and some paintings. These two just have benches. This one has a little burial. So I was talking with somebody recently about this who didn't know that most churches have people buried inside of them. In fact, the concept of burying people outside a church, like in the churchyard, started happening because people ran out of space in the churches themselves to bury people. So there are a few burials in my fictional Notre Dame here. They're mostly down that way. And if we go along this side as well, we can see that there are areas with some pots and stuff, a little altar here, and even a little confessional. We also have our holy water by the door. Unlike a modern cathedral, there aren't a bunch of pews and benches everywhere. At the time, people would have just been standing in this central section. If we get to the central altar though, we can see that there is a little pedestal here. I forgot the proper word, but this is where the person leading the sermon would speak from. Here we have our little central altar. One thing I'm really doing with this megacity build is trying to get away from using blocks for what they're meant to represent. So here, my birch and my birch fences, my birch trapdoors, my birch signs and buttons, and even all my oak stuff is all representing different types of sandy colored stone. Over on this side, you can see that there is a side door underneath this big rose window. And if we come back here, this is where the choir sits. And if we come back here, this is the kind of central altar. The real cathedral has a bunch of statues laid out here, so I'm trying my best to replicate statues using a mix of walls and heads and signs and stuff. This area is fenced off, but if we hop over this fence, You can see that there is another little altar here, and there are a bunch of paintings on the back to represent wooden carvings. So the backs of the choir seats in the real cathedral are full of these beautifully painted wooden carvings. So again, trying to replicate the building as close to one-to-one as we can really get. Over here, we just have some seating for some very important people by the last altar. And on either side here, we have a couple of depictions of Jesus. You may notice that there is a little bit of falling sand particles, and that's because this place is built with a lot of floating sand blocks. The way that I textured this building was by using a mod. So instead of having to place every single block, when you see bits of like bone block and stuff up there, that was just done using a big brush, basically. I haven't completely gotten rid of the floating sand because I kind of like the floating effect. It makes it feel almost like grand and dusty. At any rate though, we still have a bit more of the interior of this place to go over. So if we hop over this way, we can get back here to where the spiral staircase is. In real life, the spiral staircase is right here. So the reason that this thing protrudes from the outside is for a staircase, but in Minecraft, the scale for a staircase is really big and bulky, so it just wasn't possible. We had to move it to being basically in this little corner here behind the front pillar. If we climb up though, we can get to this level. You can see that this is all filled with bits of wooden supports and scaffolds. Opening the door here, we can actually get to the grand organ. So above the doorway in the cathedral, there is a really big organ, and I tried to replicate it based on the 360 panorama I got. Of course, it's not perfect, but I think it looks really cool. And I've gotten really into using these hanging signs. I think they look really great when you can make them have these little peaks. So that is another little building technique that I'm going to be using going forward because I think it looks really cool. And then over here, of course, we have the big layer of keys and then the pedals down here because you got to use your feet when you're playing the organ. If we come across to this door, you can see that this is a little living space. So I basically modeled this after Quasimodo's tiny apartment thing from the Hunchback of Notre-Dame movie. In that movie, he just has like a little bed and a little kind of living area, and then he has like a big table with a bunch of painted figures. So this is my attempt to replicate those little painted figures on the table. Although maybe I should replace these with candles, come to think of it. If you want to squeeze under here, you can actually get to this walkway. Although it does end abruptly. In the real cathedral, there is a spiral staircase tucked away into there, but there really isn't enough space to do that in Minecraft. Coming back into here though, if we squeeze on in, we can get up to the bell tower level. So we can actually come out here. This is where this little bit is. You can see down into the market down there. I haven't fully decided what the market is going to be selling. A cathedral is a pretty important place, but I also kind of just want to make it a fish market. So kind of conflicted on that at the moment. But in any case, oh, you can see some of my pillars have gotten messed up when I opened this door, I think. If we climb up here, we can see that there is a big old bronzy bell. And there is enough space through these slats that you can just barely see out into the world. So that is basically it for the actual cathedral itself. Again, I think it turned out really cool. I had to raise this spire like 5 times because every time I look back at the original photo, I was like, oh my god. This is so like ridiculously thin and tall, and I didn't even like properly capture it here. In real life, it's even thinner and taller than this, but this is about the best kind of slope that I could get, and I think it turned out really nice. You can see at the top here, I'm using an armor stand for my cross. And over here, I'm actually using a bit of a piston. The last thing that I want to go through for this video is just to show off the cemetery here. So in real life, the cathedral doesn't have a cemetery behind it. It's all like really urban Paris core. The big cemetery in Paris is the Père Lachaise cemetery, which I got the chance to visit. And it left a really big impression on me because it's so unlike any kind of modern North American cemetery. If you go to a cemetery in like Canada or the US, you'll see graves dating back about 200, maybe 2,500 years. And you'll mostly see this kind of grave. It'll be little individual graves, or it'll be a lot of like big family graves like this, where you have a bit of a wider structure. But almost all of the graves in Père Lachaise are these. They're these little kind of buildings where there are entire families buried in what looks like a tiny little house. So what I tried to do is kind of transition from the newer style of graves to coming back here and even incorporating things like little memorials. So we have a memorial there and something that looks like kind of a memorial on this side. And then as we get into the kind of core here, we get into a lot of these little, I'm not even sure what to call them, but these little kind of family graves for really important and old families, basically, until we get to the big central one. So this is the kind of family ossuary for one of the really important families in the city. I haven't really started thinking about like lore and consistency for this place yet, so I'm not sure who exactly is buried here. But if we come inside, we can see that we are repeating this kind of blue and yellow pattern, which is the colors for the city. We have a couple of really nicely carved stone caskets. I'm using chiseled bookshelves here because I think they have like a really nice kind of chiseled look to them. And if you hide that front face, you can't even tell that it's made out of wood. And then over here, we have little bits like a skull and some pots that are containing important things. I imagine that these pots are probably filled with preserved organs in some kind of alcohol. And if we come around to the side here, you can see that we can follow this path and get to a little shrine. So this is probably, I think, where the old city wall used to be, and then this used to be outside of the town. And this is to try and show a little bit of the evolution of this place. The last part of this video is just going to be showing you guys a little bit about what I've been doing in the city here. So if we come over, you can see that we have built a little bit in this area. Here I'm replicating the town gate of Košice in Slovakia, which I got the chance to visit and learn about recently. So I wanted to make it kind of a 14th century-ish building. So there is a tower, there is a barbican here, and then there is a little bridge that goes across this canal. And then of course we have this little kind of front-facing wall here just to kind of push the city's defenses out a few meters and make it look even more imposing. Over here we have the big town hall that I've built. It doesn't have an interior so far, but you can see I was messing around with some colors for this place. I think it's going to be really cool. I'm going to have like a little parliament in there, a courtroom, some prison cells. You can see that the planning phase is still really fully in effect here. There is the theater for the town, so we're going to have some kind of play going on. And yeah, I'm really happy with how this place is turning out so far. There are bits that I'm still kind of unsure about and that I'm probably going to need to come back in and redo. I really like this mountain. I don't like this retaining wall that I put in, so I'm probably going to get rid of that. And yeah, I'm still figuring out where some important things are supposed to go. I think there's probably going to be an inn over here. But anyway, you guys will slowly see this city develop. Whenever I have something that I really want to show you guys, I will make a video. And in between there, I'm probably going to do some streams every now and then. I'm considering doing a stream for the town walls at some point. I'm just not sure exactly when. But anyways, that is going to do it for today, guys. If you enjoyed this build and if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe if you want to stick around and see me do more stuff like this in the future, or if you want to hear me talk more about real life stuff like anthropology. Comment down below if you have other suggestions for buildings you want to see me replicate in Minecraft, and I will see you guys next time.